The Whispering Ridge, Part 1. The arrival, the wind tasted of damp earth and pine as I stepped out of the rented SUVs, my boots sinking slightly into the gravelly soil. Ailao Mountain, or at least this corner of it, loomed ahead, its forested slopes swallowed by a gray haze that clung to the peaks like a shroud. It was late October, and the air carried that sharp, biting chill that made my breath fall. I'd come here chasing a story, or maybe just an escape from the city's hum. My editor had laughed when I pitched it. A piece on the mysterious ridge that had gone viral after a blurry video surfaced online. A shaky clip of fog, warning signs, and a caption hinting at something lurking in the trees. "This sounds like a tourist trap," she'd said. But I'd seen the comments, the whispers of unease beneath the usual internet bravado, and I couldn't shake the itch to dig deeper. I adjusted my backpack, the weight of my recorder and notebook reassuring against my shoulders, and locked the car. The trailhead was unmarked, just a narrow path winding into the woods flanked by signs in Mandarin I could barely decipher. One looked official, with faded red characters warning against unauthorized entry. Another, smaller and hand-painted, reads simply, "Stay on the path." The paint had peeled, leaving the words jagged like teeth. The forest swallowed me quickly. The crunch of leaves underfoot was the only sound at first, crisp and rhythmic. Then came the creak, a low, groaning noise like an old house settling. I stopped, tilting my head. It wasn't the wind. The air was still, the branches above unmoving. The sound came again, fainter, from somewhere deeper in the trees. I told myself it was a tree trunk shifting, stressed by the cold. I'd read about these woods, dense subtropical, a tangle of evergreen broadleaf that muffled sound and light. But the creak lingered in my ears, a splinter in my thoughts. I kept walking, the path dipping into a shallow ravine. The fog thickened here, curling around my legs like smoke. My phone signal had died a mile back, and the GPS map I'd screenshot was useless now, the screen a blur of green and gray. I didn't mind. I'd always trusted my instincts over tech, and the ridge wasn't hard to find if you followed the slope. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, not hostile, just present. A rustle to my left made me turn, but it was only a bird, a flash of black feathers darting into the mist. By noon, I reached a clearing. The ridge stretched before me, a spine of rock and soil jutting from the forest floor. A weathered bench sat at its edge, its wood splintered and damp. Beside it, a signpost leaned crookedly, its message scratched out by time or vandals. This was the spot from the video. I was sure of it. The fog hung heavier here, and the silence felt deliberate, like the world holding its breath. I set my bag down and pulled out my recorder, pressing the red button. Day 1. Ailao Mount. I'm at the ridge now. No sign of anything unusual yet, just fog and quiet. The video mentioned a presence, but it's probably just atmosphere playing tricks. Still, there's something off. Hard to pin down. I stopped the recording and sat on the bench. The wood creaked under my weight, a sound too loud in the stillness. Then I heard it again, that groan closer now, like a door easing open. My pulse quickened, but I stayed put, straining to listen. It faded, replaced by the faint drip of water somewhere nearby. Condensation, I reasoned. From the fog, nothing more. Part 2. The echo the afternoon slipped away as I explored the ridge. I found traces of visitors, cigarette butts, a crumpled water bottle, but no one else was here now. The path looped back toward the clearing, and I noticed something I'd missed before. A narrow trail branching off, barely visible through the undergrowth. It wasn't on my map, but curiosity tugged at me. I followed it, the ground softening into mud that sucked at my boots. The trail led to a hollow, a bowl-shaped depression ringed by towering trees. In its center stood a stone marker, moss-covered and tilting to one side. It looked old, older than the tourist signs, its edges worn smooth. I brushed the moss away, revealing faint carvings, symbols I didn't recognize, angular and uneven. My fingers lingered on the stone, and for a moment I felt a vibration, a hum so subtle it might have been my imagination. I pulled my hand back, shaking off the chill creeping up my arm. That's when I heard the whisper. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, just a hiss, like air escaping a tire, threading through the trees. I spun around, scanning the hollow, but the fog blurred everything beyond a few feet. The sound came again, sharper, from behind the marker. I stepped closer, my breath shallow, and saw it, a crack in the earth, thin and jagged, barely wide enough for a hand. The whisper seemed to rise from it, a soft, insistent pull. I knelt, peering into the dark, and caught a whiff of something sour, like rotting leaves. I fumbled for my recorder, my hands trembling slightly. There's a crack here, in the hollow off the ridge. Something's, I don't know, coming from it. A sound. Not natural, but not human either. I'm starting to think this place isn't just a tourist gimmick. The whisper stopped as I spoke, leaving only the drip-drip of water and the thud of my own heartbeat. I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and backed away. The hollow felt smaller now, the trees crowding in, their branches like fingers brushing the fog. I didn't linger. Back at the clearing, the light was fading, the sky a bruised purple through the canopy. I decided to camp here, pitching my tent near the bench, where the ground was flat. The forest was quiet again, but the silence felt heavy, pressing against my ears. I cooked a quick meal on my portable stove, the hiss of the gas flame oddly comforting. As I ate, I replayed the day's recordings, the whisper faint but unmistakable through the static. It didn't sound like wind or water. It sounded like intent. Sleep didn't come easily. The tent's nylon walls rustled with every breath of air, and the creaking returned, sporadic and close. I lay still, eyes open, tracing shadows on the ceiling. Then, just as I drifted off, I felt it, the sensation of being watched, not from outside, but from within the tent. My skin prickled, and I sat up, flashlight in hand. The beam swept the corners, revealing nothing but my gear. Still, the feeling clung to me, a weight on my chest, until exhaustion finally pulled me under. Part 3. The unseen eye woke to fog so thick I could barely see the trees 10 feet away. My tent was damp, the air clammy against my face. The recorder sat beside me, its light blinking red. I hadn't turned it on last night. Frowning, I hit play. Static crackled, then my own voice slurred and distant. It's here, it's here, it's here. A pause, then that whisper louder, weaving through the words like a second speaker. My stomach twisted. I'd been alone all night. I packed quickly, the unease gnawing at me. The ridge felt different today, smaller, tighter, as if the forest had shifted closer overnight. I'd retraced my steps to the hollow, needing to understand. The stone marker was still there, unchanged, but the crack in the ground looked wider, its edges raw and freshly broken. I crouched, listening. No whisper now, just a faint hum, like a tuning fork struck far away. I reached for my recorder, but my hand froze mid-motion. Something glinted in the crack, a sliver of metal half buried in the dirt. I dug it out with a stick. A watch, old and tarnished, its face cracked but still ticking. The hand spun lazily, out of sync with time. It didn't belong here, not on a trail no one used. I dropped it into my pocket, the weight cold against my thigh, and stood. The hum grew louder, vibrating in my teeth, and the fog seemed to pulse, thickening around me. I turned to leave, but the path was gone. The trees pressed in, their trunks identical, the hollow a trap I couldn't escape. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to breathe, to think. I'd marked the trail with a scrap of cloth yesterday, red, tied to a branch. I found it after 10 agonizing minutes, the fabric damp and frayed, hanging lower than I remembered. The path reappeared, leading me back to the clearing, but the bench was missing. In its place sat a pile of stones, stacked unevenly, like a child's attempt at a cairn. I hadn't built it. My tent was still there, untouched, but the air felt wrong, too still, too thick. I sat by the tent, the watch heavy in my hand. The ticking was louder now, insistent, drowning out the forest silence. I didn't record it. I didn't trust the recorder anymore. Instead, I listened, waiting for the whisper, the creak, anything to break the tension coiling in my gut. Hours passed, the fog unchanging, the light dimming into dusk. Then I heard it, not the whisper, but footsteps soft and deliberate, circling the clearing. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam cutting through the haze, but there was nothing, just the crunch of leaves, closer, then gone. Part 4. The departure. I didn't sleep that night. The footsteps returned twice, always stopping just beyond sight. By morning, I was done. I broke camp, stuffing gear into my bag with shaking hands, and hiked back to the SUV. The forest let me go without resistance, the path clear, the fog thinning as I descended. The car was where I'd left it, keys still in my pocket, but the watch was gone. I'd felt it slip away somewhere on the trail, a cold absence I couldn't explain. Driving back, I replayed the recordings in my head, the whisper looping endlessly. I didn't listen to them again, not yet. The city welcomed me with noise and light, but the ridge clung to me, a shadow I couldn't shake. At home, I found the recorder in my bag, its light blinking red. I hadn't turned it on since the hollow. I pressed play, bracing myself. Static. Then my voice, calm, unfamiliar. It's still here. It never left. The whisper followed, clear now, a single word repeated. Stay. I deleted the file, but the word echoes still. I don't know what I brought back, or if I left anything behind. The ridge waits, silent, and I wonder if it's done with me, or if I'm done with it.